Hello, and welcome to Sleep Stories World. I'd like to invite you to step into a world of relaxation and tranquility with this bedtime story, designed to help you unwind and de-stress. By engaging in this story, you can embark on a journey that nurtures and soothes your mind, promoting overall well-being through sound, restful sleep. Before we begin, let's prepare your space for rest. Ensure you're somewhere comfortably cool, dark, and quiet. If you need to adjust anything, your curtains, your temperature, your pillows, please do so now. When you're ready, lie down and let yourself settle into your bed. Feel the weight of your body being supported. You may want to cover yourself with a light blanket as your body relaxes. Now, gently close your eyes. There's nothing you need to see anymore tonight. Your only task now is to be here, allowing yourself to receive the gift of rest. Take a deep breath in through your nose and exhale slowly through your mouth. Breathe in deeply, feeling your chest expand. Breathe out, feeling your body sink deeper into your bed. In and out. With each breath, you're signaling to your body that it's safe to rest. Now, imagine being surrounded by a warm, vibrant light. This light is gentle and comforting, carrying with it a deep sense of peace and safety. As you breathe in, let this warm light fill your chest. As you breathe out, imagine it spreading gently through your upper body. Breathe in, and let the light expand through your shoulders, your arms, your back. Breathe out, and feel it filling your stomach, your neck, your head, every space within you glowing softly. If a thought comes by, acknowledge it like watching a leaf float by on a gentle stream, and then let it drift away. There will be time for those thoughts later. Now is for rest. On your next breath in, let the warm light travel downward. Feel it reach your hips, your thighs, your knees. Breathe out, and sense it flowing down to your ankles, to your toes. Every part of you now is surrounded by this gentle, warm glow. You are completely enveloped in comfort and peace. Focus on your breath and the warm light surrounding you. If your mind wanders, simply guide it back, gently, to your breath, to the light. You are safe. You are comfortable. You are exactly where you need to be. As we move into tonight's story, allow yourself to let go even more. Let the words wash over you like a gentle tide. You don't need to follow every detail. Simply receive the story as a gift, a soft companion as you journey toward sleep. And now, let us begin. The preparations for these Antarctic expeditions were undertakings of staggering complexity, requiring years of planning, vast sums of money, and the coordination of hundreds of people. Each expedition leader approached these challenges in their own distinctive way, revealing the personalities and philosophies that would shape their journeys to come. Scott's Terra Nova expedition required funding of approximately £40,000, an enormous sum in 1910, equivalent to several million pounds today. The British government contributed only a portion of this amount, and Scott spent months travelling across Britain, giving lectures and seeking donations from wealthy patrons, scientific societies, and anyone who believed in the importance of Antarctic exploration. It was exhausting work for a man more comfortable commanding ships than courting donors, but Scott understood that modern exploration required not just brave men and good ships, but substantial financial backing. The Terra Nova itself was a whaling ship, built in 1884 from sturdy wood designed to withstand the crushing pressure of ice. She was 187 feet long, powered by both sail and a coal-fired steam engine. Scott had the ship extensively modified for polar work, reinforcing the hull and installing laboratories and scientific equipment. The Terra Nova would carry a crew of 6 to 5 men, along with 33 dogs, 19 Siberian ponies, and 3 motor sledges, early tracked vehicles that Scott hoped would revolutionize polar travel. Those motor sledges represented Scott's faith in technology and progress. They were heavy, temperamental machines, but in testing they had proven capable of hauling enormous loads across snow. If they worked as hoped, they could transport supplies far more efficiently than dogs or ponies, allowing the expedition to establish supply depots deeper into the Antarctic interior. It was an optimistic gamble, placing trust in untested machinery in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Amundsen's approach was radically different. His ship, the Fram, had been specifically designed for polar exploration by the Norwegian naval architect Colin Archer. The Fram's hull had a unique rounded shape that allowed it to rise up when squeezed by ice rather than being crushed, a design that had already proven itself during Fridtjof Nansen's Arctic drift expedition years earlier. Amundsen secured the use of the Fram by convincing Nansen, Norway's greatest living explorer, that his North Pole expedition was worthy of this legendary vessel. But of course, Amundsen was no longer planning to go north. In secret, he modified his plans and supplies for an Antarctic journey. He purchased nearly 100 Greenland dogs, animals bred for generations to pull sledges in polar conditions. Amundsen had studied extensively under the Inuit and other indigenous Arctic peoples during his time navigating the Northwest Passage years before, and he had learned that dogs, when properly managed and fed, were the most reliable form of polar transport. They could navigate in blizzards, sleep in the snow, and unlike machines or ponies, they were adapted to the cold. Amundsen's expedition was lean and focused. He selected only 19 men total, experts in skiing, dog handling, and navigation. There would be no large scientific program, no diverse research objectives. Amundsen had one goal: reach the South Pole first and return safely. Every decision, every piece of equipment, every ounce of supplies was chosen with this single purpose in mind. It was exploration stripped to its essential elements. On June 1, 1910, the Terra Nova departed from London amid great fanfare. Crowds lined the docks, bands played, and flags waved. Scott and his officers wore their naval uniforms, standing at attention as the ship pulled away from the pier. There was a sense of national pride in this venture. Britain, the greatest maritime power in the world, sending its best to claim the last great geographical prize. The Terra Nova would stop in South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand, taking on additional supplies and crew members before turning south toward the ice. Just a few weeks later, on June 6, 1910, the Fram slipped quietly out of Oslo harbor. Amundsen had told his crew and backers they were heading to the Arctic, and for weeks, as the Fram sailed south through the Atlantic, only Amundsen and a few trusted companions knew the truth. It wasn't until September, when the ship reached Madeira, a Portuguese island off the coast of Africa, that Amundsen finally gathered his crew and told them of the change in plans. They would not be going north to the Arctic. They were going south, to Antarctica, to race the British to the South Pole. The crew had a choice. They could leave the expedition, or they could continue knowing they were now engaged in a race that the world didn't yet know had begun. To a man, they chose to continue. Amundsen then sent a telegram to Scott, who was already en route to Antarctica aboard the Terra Nova. The telegram was brief and courteous but carried enormous implications. Beg leave to inform you Fram proceeding Antarctic. Amundsen. When Scott received this telegram in Melbourne, Australia, in October 1910, he was stunned. The Southern Ocean and Antarctic coast were vast enough that two expeditions could work independently, but both men knew they were heading to the same place, the South Pole. What had been a scientific expedition with exploration as one of several goals had suddenly become a race. Scott's response was measured but clear. He sent a simple reply: proceed. The two expeditions would approach Antarctica from different directions, establishing their base camps on opposite sides of the Ross Ice Shelf, an enormous floating platform of ice roughly the size of France that extends from the Antarctic continent out over the ocean. This ice shelf, in places over 1,000 feet thick, floats on the sea while remaining attached to the land, creating a stable if surreal landscape where explorers could build camps and begin their journeys inland. Scott chose to establish his base at Cape Evans on Ross Island, the same general area where his discovery expedition had wintered years before. It was a known location with certain advantages: protection from the worst winds, access to seal colonies for fresh meat, and a route toward the pole that followed the route he and Shackleton had partially explored. The journey from Cape Evans to the South Pole would cover approximately 920 miles one way, 1,840 miles round trip. Every mile would need to be traveled by foot, hauling sledges loaded with supplies. Amundsen established his base, which he called Framheim, on the Ross Ice Shelf itself, in a location called the Bay of Whales. This was a bold and somewhat risky choice. The ice shelf was constantly moving, slowly flowing toward the ocean where it would eventually carve off as icebergs. But Amundsen had studied reports from earlier expeditions and determined that the Bay of Whales had remained stable for decades. More importantly, this location placed him approximately 60 miles closer to the pole than Scott's base, a significant advantage in a journey that would be measured in every painful mile. Through the Antarctic summer of 1910 to 1911, both expeditions worked frantically to prepare for their attempts on the pole, which would have to wait until the following summer. The Antarctic winter, from March to October, made travel impossible. Temperatures would plunge, storms would rage for weeks, and the sun would disappear below the horizon for 4 months of continuous darkness. Both teams used this time to establish supply depots along their planned routes, hauling tons of food, fuel, and equipment out onto the ice shelf and leaving them in marked caches that they would rely on during their return journeys. This depot-laying work was crucial but dangerous. Men and animals worked in temperatures of -40 degrees and lower, in conditions where a blizzard could strike with almost no warning. The depots had to be precisely located and carefully marked with flags on tall bamboo poles, because in the vast whiteness of the ice shelf, a depot just a few hundred yards off course might as well be invisible. Missing a depot on the return journey, when men were exhausted and supplies running low, could mean the difference between life and death. Scott's largest depot, which he called 1-ton depot, was established at approximately 79 degrees 29 minutes south latitude, about 150 miles from his base at Cape Evans. It contained substantial supplies, enough to sustain several men for weeks. However, Scott had intended to place this depot even farther south, at 80 degrees, but the weakening condition of his ponies forced him to establish it 35 miles north of his planned location. This decision, made for practical reasons in the moment, would later have tragic consequences. Amundsen, meanwhile, methodically established a series of depots extending south from Framheim, each carefully positioned at 1-degree intervals of latitude and stocked with precisely calculated supplies. His depots were marked not just with single flags, but with lines of black flags extending east and west for several miles, creating a safety margin in case his navigation was slightly off during the return. Every detail was considered, every risk anticipated and mitigated where possible. As the long Antarctic winter settled in, both teams retreated to their huts and waited. At Cape Evans, Scott's men conducted scientific research, taking measurements, collecting specimens, and recording observations. They gave lectures to one another on everything from Antarctic geology to polar photography. It was, in many ways, like a small university in the ice, with Scott encouraging intellectual engagement to keep minds sharp during the dark months. At Framheim, Amundsen's smaller team focused on different preparations. They modified their equipment, adjusted their sledges to make them lighter and more efficient, and worked constantly with their dogs, building trust and understanding between men and animals. They also reduced the weight of everything they would carry, sewing lighter tents, cutting toothbrush handles in half, eliminating every unnecessary ounce. Amundsen understood that over hundreds of miles, every pound of excess weight would exact a cost in energy and time. Both groups were now committed. The ships had departed, returning to warmer waters to escape being frozen in for the winter. There would be no rescue, no resupply, no turning back. When the sun finally returned and the temperatures rose enough to permit travel, both expeditions would set out across the ice, racing toward the same distant point at the bottom of the world. In the quiet darkness of the polar winter, with the southern lights dancing green and purple across the sky, these men prepared themselves mentally and physically for what lay ahead. They knew the statistics. Previous Antarctic expeditions had seen men die from scurvy, from falls into crevasses, from exposure, from accidents. The cold alone could kill in minutes if one became separated from the group or fell through the ice into the frigid waters below. Yet they also felt the pull of something larger than themselves, the knowledge that they were participating in a historic endeavor, that their names might be remembered alongside the greatest explorers in human history, or that the scientific knowledge they brought back might benefit humanity for generations to come. As you rest tonight, imagine those long Antarctic nights, the wind howling outside sturdy wooden huts, the men inside playing cards, writing letters they wouldn't be able to send for months, and dreaming of the journey that lay ahead when the sun returned.